This week on Rockstar Superhero. Farhad Hossain is the creative force behind Shumaun, a DC area progressive rock band of epic power and ethereal melody. I discovered Shumaun through my relationship with Freeman Promotions. Freeman works with a number of incredible artists, and Shumaun is one such act. As a songwriter, Farhad credits both his love for progressive rock bands like Rush and Dream Theater, that both preceded him in his creative journey, and at the same time, songwriters and groups known for simple and lovely melodies, an example being Tears for Fears. Now, you may not hear the influences directly in the music, but you surely hear it between the lines. There is a magic and a purpose in what Farhad brings to the musical mission of Shumaun. Their next record will be coming out later this year, perhaps as early as late summer, but for now, we at least have one new track to listen to on YouTube or wherever you get your digital media. That song is the impeccable Memories of Water and is the piece that bookends this show today. I'm just happy to have talked with him, and now I get to share it with you. So hang on, because this is my interview with another guaranteed future classic, A Man and a Band. The band is Shumaun, and the man, Farhad Hossain, he's on the Rockstar Superhero podcast.
Wow, this is awesome. Farhad, man, I am so stoked to have you here. One of my favorite new bands, Shumaun, and I am gifted beyond belief that I have a great relationship with some of the best publicity people in the world because they got me to you. So thank you for coming on my show.
Thank you for having me, man. This is really exciting. I'm so glad you liked our single. I mean, like it's not the, the kind of stuff that people can just attach to. Well, maybe there's more than some other ones, but yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, it's really, really special. And it's one of those things, I think it's because I'm a drummer and because I've been playing a long time and I have this jaded ear that just expects sort of a high level of talent and a high quality the tonality, everything about the recordings have to be very professional for me to bite onto them. I don't do well with garage band music, for example. And what's so great about Shumaun is it's well thought out. It's very lovely and distinct. The tones are clear. The musicianship is super, super, super high end, right? There's a very practiced quality to your music, but there's this freedom in it. I don't know if I can explain that very well, but the first word I thought of, and I wrote this down in my notes when I listened to that single, was freedom. The song sounds like you're flying.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting because lyrically it's more, like internal struggle and battle. So that's great. I think musically it kind of relays that because it's so open and kind of playful in a sense. Like the verses are kind of, these chords that just kind of ring out that aren't really moving much. They're just kind of shifting little notes here and there, but pretty much staying in the same position. So it kind of opens up the sound a bit. So maybe that's what you're hearing. I'm not sure.
Maybe. I think the beauty of music is, one, it's artistic and it, and creative, but it's a fingerprint of a moment. It's a fingerprint about the band. It's a fingerprint about the sound. It's a fingerprint of the studio it's recorded in. It's all those beautiful things that have to happen in a very specific way. So for me, I think, at least as a listener to the music, it's not that the lyrics aren't important, because I do want to get to that. I think that's a significant part of what you do. But I listen to the flow of the phrases and the artistic integrity of the music. That is what captured me. I mean, it was instant. I have that chorus that is so hooky, that chorus of that song. So I do want to get to that. I do want to talk to that a bit, if that's cool.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, for me, some of the stuff we write can be pretty complicated musically at
Yeah.
times, not all the times, of course. So vocally, I try to come up with a completely different approach. Like, I don't want the vocals to sound like it's chopped up and overly complicated. I want like people to be able to just sing it, and not have to be like this progressive music fan to listen to it. I want the average person to just kind of listen to the song and say, yeah, I get it. The melody is easy to kind of sing along to. And that way I'm not alienating like a whole slew of people that are just music fans, that don't have to actually understand what the music is doing underneath. So that's kind of my approach. And, like I pull a lot of my melodies from a lot of like 80s acts, believe it or not, like 80s new wave acts. And
Wow.
so that's where a lot of those vocal melodies coming from. Like, the 80s were, big, huge hooks. Even the verses and the bridges, they're just all really melodic and catchy. And I think that just kind of stuck to me. So regardless of how complicated the musical bed is, the vocal melody more than likely is going to be as simplified as possible to kind of bring some sense to it and balance into the whole track.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it. What I love about your music, and I really mean this, Farhad, is it's taken all of the technical aspects of what you could do, but you've been very thoughtful, and you just explained it perfectly. You got to a question I was going to get to in a bit, but it's really about the juxtaposition of technique versus melody and why both are imperative to the music. They make sense together. And yet I think why a progressive music listener like myself would be drawn to it is there is hook. And I don't want to say just enough. I think there's a ton of hook, but there's a lot of musicianship too. And it never gets lost in that cape wearing 1970s, fiddling way too many notes thing that happened with a lot of progressive bands that got lost in how much crap can we put on a record,
Yeah. I think like, if I were to write these songs, if I was an 18-year-old, it would pretty much go in that direction. Like, let's stick in as many notes as we possibly can. And that's the stuff I used to write more so when I was younger. Like most of the, prog bands, they start off with something to prove, I guess. Look what I can do. Look at my technique. Like I've been practicing for 6 years. I have to show it. And that's completely the opposite place of where I am right now. Is if I have to prove a point, then I'm not really doing it for the sense of the music. I just rather want people to think, oh, look, I can do a sweep arpeggio or something like that. And anytime you force things into a song, I think it's taking away from the, like just the beauty of being in that moment of writing a song and the music being like a snapshot of where you are. I mean, like, I don't know, maybe sweep picking and things like that are natural for some people. For me, it isn't. It takes an effort. So for me, I just try to, it could be like the skill set as well. Like, we're not the greatest musicians in the world. So it's just like, you've got a bunch of musicians together that want to be able to do these things but they can't. So they just write these pop songs and disguise them under the progressive banner for musical acceptance.
Yeah. There's a lot that you're saying in there, though, that applies to everybody. I mean, I think, if I may be so bold, I think the reality is everybody likes a little bit of everything. I mean, certainly, what I would say, quote unquote, traditional prog, listeners, they like their atmospheric, they like their choppy, they love stuff with a lot going on. And they kind of like to be able to either say that they understand it, or if they're a musician, they love to be able to say, I can play that too. But there's so much look at me in all of it. And I think it's really mature of you. And this goes back to how I felt about that song when I heard it for the first time. There's a level of maturity that understands that you have to have both. You have to serve the song, but you still have to show what you can do because your listeners demand it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think some of that just comes out naturally. Like, your vocabulary of, techniques, whether it be a bass or a drum or a guitar, gets to a certain standpoint that some things are going to be more natural for you, studying the guitar 10 years than they would be 3 years or 20 years, so, I have a certain toolkit that I go to that's natural. So if I was improvising something, there's certain things that you'll notice that I do more frequent than others. I think that's true for a lot of guitar players. They have their bag of tricks that they're consistent with, and they're, that's what they do. That kind of ties them to like, oh, that's his sound. That's what he likes doing. I certainly have that. It's not to the level of, technical ability that a lot of the people that I adore have. But like right now, I've kind of come to the point where like, okay, I am who I am as a guitar player. I don't strive to be that much better when it comes to the technical element of it. I'd even say for me, like, I'm not even comfortable saying like I'm a guitar player rather than I use a guitar as a writing tool to write songs.
Yeah.
It's like most of my favorite artists are those that actually, identify as songwriters, I guess, more than just a guitar player or, just a bass player or a drummer. Guys like Sting, Peter Gabriel. Yeah. So that's where I draw a lot of my influences. And as a guitar player, I think I don't look to guitar players anymore as influences. I just look at bands and songwriters in general.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think, again, going back to the word maturity, which maybe I'm overusing today, but there is a very obvious instinct that you have there to steer clear of what might be seen as arrogance, right? So musical arrogance. Look at, again, the look at what I can do thing. Yeah. But I have a feeling you wear your influences on your sleeve and you probably don't necessarily say that out loud. The hardest part for a guy like me is identifying influences or thinking we have identified influences, and then we offend you by saying, oh, this is how you sound. You know what I mean? But I'm curious, so I don't have to throw myself under the bus. Who were you influenced by? You mentioned Sting, you mentioned Peter Gabriel. Were there certain progressive artists or were there certain songwriters that really, impacted you in a strange and beautiful way?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one, I don't know if it's as obvious. I think to me, it's really obvious is Rush, just from a songwriting point. Yeah, they were huge.
Yeah, of course.
Enormous for me. Dream Theater was a big part when I was much younger. So a lot of any chops that I've developed, if any, came from that era of my development as a guitar player, back when Images and Words, after Images and Words, but right around when Awake came out. That's when I, John Petrucci was like my guitar god. And, that was me graduating from Kirk Hammett from Metallica.
Nice.
Yeah. Metallica was a huge influence as well. And then I got into more of the progressive, the 70s progressive stuff like Yes and Genesis. Genesis was huge. Yes was pretty big. Pink Floyd for the atmospheric stuff. And then from the 80s, like one of my favorite bands of all time is Tears for Fears. Just from a songwriting perspective, I think Roland is like the greatest songwriter ever.
Yeah.
And then bands like Faith No More and the stuff that Mike Patton does, which is just amazing. So Faith No More was a big influence as well. Queensryche from a vocal standpoint, Jeff Tate, and the dual guitar stuff that Michael Wilton, Chris DeGarmo did. And that would be the big chunk, I would say. And then there's a whole slew of like international artists and things like that I pull from. Everything from the 80s I was a big fan of, regardless of genre. So yeah, I mean, I definitely wear my influences on my sleeves, and it doesn't offend me at all if someone says, "Oh, you guys sound like this band or that band." We're all taking from one another, and when I first heard Dream Theater's first record, "When Dream Day Unite," I was like, "Wow, this guy sounds like Geddy Lee," and obviously Rush was a big influence on them, so it goes hand in hand.
Yeah, it's interesting, Farhad. I think you and I are going to be best friends because I'm telling you, man, you literally read my mind. all the things that I thought were your influences. What's really strange is you mentioned Tears for Fears, and I agree with you. I will tell you, when I had a chance to see Tears for Fears a number of years ago, when Roland came out on the stage, they opened with a track from Raul and the Kings of Spain. They opened with Sorry.
Okay, yeah.
Which is a great song. And long story short is they ended the show by playing Radiohead's Creep.
Right.
And that was that era when he was really into that. But what he would say, and I don't know if you ever saw them live at this time, but he would say, I really believe this is the best song ever written by a human. I think this is better than anything ever written by anyone.
Yeah.
That song.
Yeah.
And I love a guy like that who is such an epic storyteller and has figured out how melody works. And he's able to share that and sort of empower it and increase its apogee. But I love that you caught all of this, and this is you too. It's really fascinating how much we are similar. May I ask how old you are? Because I will tell. I'm 54.
I am 42.
Okay. So you wear that well too, because you look like you're 28.
Yeah, I get that a lot.
Yeah.
So like, like I tell others, where I look to Rush is like, they've got all this technical music, but the average listener can listen to it. There's all kinds of odd time signatures, but the average listener has no idea. It just sounds like a good song. And musically, I think I pull from that a lot, where I try to obscure any odd time signatures and try to make it as simplified as possible. But then when it comes to melody and songwriting, Tears for Fears is the kind of band that when I listen to, that's the only band where I listen to and I'll just be like, oh, I'm doing everything wrong. This is not working. Why can't I just write a good song? Roland is just such an amazing songwriter for me. He's like one of the few that I'm just like, I feel like a failure as a songwriter when I listen to that band, even a solo project for that matter.
Yeah, no, that's fair. When anybody ever asks me what my favorite song of all time is, I say Woman in Chains, because I think it's the best song ever written. I really, truly do. It's a perfect song. And it has that pedal tone the entire time and finally releases you in the last chorus.
Yeah, it's an amazing track. Yeah.
It's a beautiful,
I think it was asked that Whitney Houston should do the Oleta part. And then, I don't know, something didn't work out. And I guess they met Oleta, which was the perfect voice for the track. But yeah.
I want to say they met her in Kansas City or St. Louis in a hotel bar.
That's exactly what happened. Yeah,
something unbelievable. Well, we're here to talk about the upcoming record. We're here to talk about Memories of Water, which is the song, by the way. I apologize in the beginning because I kept saying the song. But this song, Memories of Water, on this upcoming album that I don't know the name of, I apologize. But I'll have you share that with us. Tell us maybe when it's coming out. But what I'm curious is, how did you write this song? Did you write this as a group? And where's the concept for the video? Because it's clearly sort of an homage to your younger selves.
Yeah. I wrote it. So pretty much every song on the record I kind of wrote on my own and just kind of sent the parts out to the rest of the guys. I knew that I wanted to write something that was easily accessible. And just kind of made an impact from the get-go. So that was my goal with this one. The video has absolutely nothing to do with the lyrics.
Okay.
Yeah. I just figured the title was Memories of Water, and I was like, what can I do? We're all in quarantine. We're not really getting together. So I was just going through old videos, and I was like, well, memories, water, whatever, liquid memories. Let's just throw a bunch of footage of us when we were younger. It was fun for me because I didn't watch a lot of these videos in forever. Some since like the mid 90s or the late 90s. So just to go through all that footage was interesting. And, emotional as well, because there's some footage of friends that I had that are no longer with us. So it was just kind of going back and watching this footage. But it's also kind of a testament of how long we've known each other in the band, like Jose, the bass player, Tyler, the other guitar player. I mean, I've met Tyler when I was in the 7th grade, so we go back quite a long time.
Yeah.
So it was fun to do the video. The song came really fast. And usually when that happens, I think it's a good thing. It's like, okay, I don't have to change much because I'm not overthinking anything. That song pretty much just kind of wrote itself. It's that, like, I was just sat down with my guitars, played those chords, and it just kind of built on it. I didn't have to do too many revisions on it.
Yeah, it's like a perfect golf stroke. It has everything and it just flows into itself, and you can just see it sail, right? I mean, there's this, I don't even know what the word is. I'm totally making it up right now, but there's this sort of just beautiful growth from it. It just happens and it just flows. It actually sounds like water, which is an intriguing idea and concept. But what I love is that you said it just happened. And to me, there's almost like a download, a spiritual download that you receive these songs, and there's a grace in it. And I love what you've made from this. It's really special.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's strange because, you know, like, it's about that moment in time. So for every song I write, anytime I listen to it, which is not that much, because while you're creating an album, that's all you're doing is listening to these songs. So by the time it's out, it's left your system. You don't want to hear it whatsoever. But like when I do listen to it, it just takes me back to that specific time when I was writing it, or a specific time within that period of time that I was writing it. And for this one, I know it was really late at night. You know, it was like maybe like 2 in the morning, and I just came down to my studio. I was like, okay, I want to get something done. I can't do nothing. So anytime I'm sitting around doing nothing, I get antsy, and I'm like, I have to do something. And you know, like, to stop myself from, you know, depressing myself or something, I'll just have to go down and be productive and do something creative. And that song, I was just like, wow, it's just kind of like coming out. It's like, you know, something kind of takes over you, and it's like, you know, you're like the medium in a sense, coming right out. And those are beautiful moments, because that doesn't always happen. There's some songs on this record where I did like a million revisions and, you know, just thought it was utter crap at some point, and then, oh, maybe it's good, maybe it's okay, give it to the band, they like it, I'm like, okay, well, you know, what do I know? But this was one of the easy ones for sure.
Yeah, that's amazing. There's this, your last album is One Day Closer to Yesterday. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And there were 2 songs on there that I had heard that really struck me. And I don't want to say they're similar to what you're doing now, but you can see the evolution. One is Go, and the other is Ambrosia.
Okay.
And Ambrosia really, really, really touched me. That's another piece of yours that I found just kind of a next level thing. Mm-hmm. But what I love about, to me, the connecting dot, and maybe I'm completely off base, and I'm sure you'll tell me, is there seems to be a spiritual bent to all of your material, whether it's questioning the wondering of creation, or the actual discussion of, you know, God, or a faith bent, or again the searching for faith. If I may be so bold, what's the seeking?
Yeah, I think I mean, you hit the nail right on the coffin. I mean, like, that is a bulk of what I write about. And anything I do write about, even if it's like about relationships or anything like that, there's that element of it that just naturally comes in. I've always been kind of a big part of me has always been kind of seeking. You know, I do meditate, and a big part of my life is, you know, taking from that spiritual realm, I guess. So a lot of that comes from that seeking what is true, what is right. You know, transcending the self is the big thing that I write about, like separating yourself from the ego. You know, like, what do you really want? And that's what Memories of Water is kind of about. It's when you think you're making a decision based on what your heart is telling you, but really it's what your ego is telling you. And more than likely it's a tarnished view, because your ego is so manipulated with the environment that you're in, right? So most likely it's misguided and tainted. So it's that confusion of trying to separate yourself from like, is this really me? Is this what I really want? And then like, God, what is God? And just concepts like that, like, so, and I am coming from a spiritual background. I'm very intrigued by like the Sufi tradition and in Islam. So there's a bit of that Sufi kind of vibe. Some would say kind of hippie-ish for that matter, when it comes to like, meditation and separating yourself from the worldly desires, I guess. And trying to achieve that. I'm not like a monk or anything like that, and I'm far from achieving that. I think that's the struggle is just kind of putting purpose in everything you do and everything you see and how it affects you. So that always comes out in my lyrics for sure.
And we're back. So tell me how Shumaun came to be, because initially, wasn't it a solo project and this was just going to be your thing, and then you kind of maybe got lonely?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened, actually. So I was in a band called Iris Divine. They were a progressive metal band. They're still going on. And like towards the end of my tenure with that band, I just felt kind of I like every band I was in prior to that was also kind of progressive rock or progressive metal, and I kind of got sick of it. And it was just kind of burning me out, and I wanted to do something different. So I started writing stuff on my own, and it wasn't anything resembling what Shumaun is now. It was very poppy and just odd. Like some songs sounded like, what's the guy's name? CeeLo Green.
Yep.
Yeah, like some things sounded like that. Some things were a little bit more melodic and like kind of like Pink Floyd. But it was completely different from what I was doing with Iris Divine and the progressive metal stuff. And that was the point of that. And then when I left the band, I just said, I'm just going to focus on this and do something completely different. And the point of Shumaun was, I'm not going to step on a distortion pedal at all. Everything's going to be clean, and it's going to be like just pure acoustic instruments as well. And then I wrote a whole record. That was like Shumaun's first record theoretically. But then I kind of, I started, as I was continuing to write, it started coming back, like the whole progressive thing. And I distanced myself enough from it that it started calling me back. And then I noticed that I was starting to write progressive rock songs again. So I was like, okay, let me just go ahead and scrap that first 10.
Wow.
And that's what I did. So I scrapped the first 10 songs and then rewrote the first album. And that became our first record. Ambrosia was actually on the first record as well. So then I wanted to play live. So I was like, well, I can't do this by myself. So I just reached out to Jose, who also played in bands with me since high school. And I knew that we liked the same music, so I didn't have to put out an ad to find someone new. And that was another part. I wanted to work with people that I was already friends with. I didn't want to make it seem like it's kind of like a business relationship,
Right.
So I just went through like who plays musical instruments that I know well, and so Jose came into play, and then Tyler as well. I've known forever. So I just said, let's just, do you guys want to be a part of this thing? And they liked what they heard, and we started the band officially.
Yeah, and you had mentioned that you have a drummer, but he chooses to do other things at times, and so you do have a lot of guest work come in. You had Travis Orban, who I know. We should talk about that offline. But a killer drummer, and Mark Zonder on this track, Memories of Water from Fate's Warning.
Yeah.
So how did those relationships spring in, and are you talking about working with them full time?
Not so much full time. I don't think we do enough for them to be in the band full time. But yeah, I mean, one thing, I've always loved drummers. I've always loved drumming. If I had my choice, I would have been a drummer before a guitar player. That's a hard sell for a parent, to have a kid bashing away at a drum set in the basement. So I knew that wasn't going to slide. So I picked guitar. But anytime I listen to a song, I hone in on the rhythm section before anything else, believe it or not, which is strange. So I've always appreciated great drummers. Obviously Rush, Dream Theater, all those guys, any of those progressive bands have like these phenomenal drummers.
Yeah.
For this record that's coming up, it's actually called Memories and Intuition. We've got Mark Zonder, obviously, from the first single. Atma Noor, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He did a lot of drumming for Jason Becker, a phenomenal drummer as well. And he was actually one of the first drummers I ever gotten into because he played drums for Tony McAlpine. I'm not sure if you know him.
Yes, very much.
He was one of my favorite guitar players. So Atma was his drummer. So he's on the record. Thomas Lang is on the record as well.
I love Thomas. I love Thomas. He's going to be on the show soon.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We're lining up as a guest right now. We're just trying to figure out a time to get him on the show.
Yeah, he's playing on 4 tracks on the.
Wow, that's great. How'd you stumble into Thomas?
So I've always loved Thomas's work.
Oh, okay.
So, with him, it was just I was like, I wonder if I shoot him a message, like, would he respond to me? And he didn't. I shot him a message, and I think it was like maybe 2 months later where he actually responded and said, hey, I checked out your songs and they're fantastic. I would love to play. So I shot him some demos, and he was game. So I was like, clear my plans. This guy's going to be on my record, and we just kind of took it from there. It was just kind of shot in the dark. But he really loved the tracks, and that really meant a lot to me because that's Thomas Lang. It's not like some random drummer down the street, right?
No, you've had some epic guys on your records, man. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And then I'm not sure if you're familiar with Pain of Salvation. That band, their drummer is also playing on the record, as well as a friend of mine named Chris, who is also a phenomenal drummer.
Nice.
So our drummer, Dunveer, I played in bands with him for years as well, since probably 2006. He was in an original band with me called Encompass, followed me through to Iris Divine, and then he was our drummer for Shumaun as well. He had to leave for work. He moved out of state, so we got another guy, and then Dunveer moved back, so we recorded the second album with him. But then, he decided he'd rather just play live. He wasn't really comfortable in the studio setting, so that's when I had no choice but to reach out to other drummers. Luckily, we can still play live, but yeah, I mean, I got really lucky, I guess, with the drummers, and unlucky at the same time, I guess, because there's always a revolving flow of drummers for the band. So we're not assigned to like a single drummer, which gives me some freedom, which I like, because I do like the stylistic differences of working with various drummers, but it can make things complicated as well.
Yeah, I imagine so. You said a few things a few moments ago that I would like to kind of go back to and I want to address because it's really fascinating to me. This show is really built around the idea of, I think I mentioned this in the beginning, sort of humanizing musicians, humanizing celebrity, all the things that people think people are that they aren't.
Right.
But the one thing that's beautiful, and you've been experiencing this at an extraordinary rate, is what I call the artist's journey. And some people go through this, it's 4 stages. They go through those 4 stages really fast, or they take a while. And you had mentioned that you kind of got away from the progressive thing, the heavier progressive thing. And you kept coming back to it, right? So here's the thinking, is that I think of artists like superheroes. So imagine Spider-Man, right? Spider-Man, he's just a normal nerdy kid. He's just Peter Parker. And then he gets bitten by a spider, and he doesn't know that anything has even occurred, but he's been bitten. And then there's a moment where that superpower is revealed. And then he's excited about what the superpower can do for him. So he goes out into the world and kind of elevates himself, gets a little bit of ego going because he knows he's doing good for the world. But then a tragedy occurs and his uncle gets killed because he didn't stop that guy. Right? So then there's that dilemma phase, but ultimately he wants to quit and give up. And his aunt walks in and says, you know what, Peter, you've got to be who you are. You've got to be the man you've been gifted to be, the man you've been created to be. And he becomes Spider-Man. because he was always Spider-Man.
Right. Yeah.
And what I love about your story, Farhad, is you were always a thoughtful, progressive rock guitarist with a very beautiful voice. And you have probably fought that off for a long time. Is this who I want to be? Is this the direction I want to go? Is this going to better the world? Is this going to better my world? And the reality is once you finally accept it, everything falls into place and everybody says, well, duh, dude, this is who you are. And I think Memories of Water, I'm sorry, it sounds like I'm just pumping you full of air right now, but I'm telling you, dude,
Keep pumping.
Memories of Water is your aha. It is. You've finally crested. And when Thomas Lang and Mark Zonder, when these guys say they want to be a part of it, sure, I get it. They have a hired gun thing going on too. That's what a lot of these guys do when they're not, in their own bands or touring or whatever. But they can say no.
Yeah.
And they didn't. In fact, they pursued you.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's an honor for them to just actually, they don't have to say they liked it. They can just say, here you go. Thanks for getting me. But I genuinely feel that they did enjoy the songs, and that says, that means a lot to me, right? And it's like that Thomas would actually take his time to want to be on a record like this. Because if it sucked for him, I don't think he'd want his name on the song.
No.
Yeah.
No. He's been on Falco Records.
That's true. Yeah. He's kind of everywhere, honestly, which is great. He can play like the crazy melodic death metal stuff, and then play disco as well. That's the kind of versatility that I really like. And then with the progressive thing, I think, especially with this band, I don't feel limited. So I feel like if I want to write a pop song, I can, and it still kind of sound like me or Shumaun. And so for this record, it's kind of streamlined. I do think it's my best songwriting out of the three, and it's not, artists always say that, the album that they're working on is usually the best one. They always say that to sell records or whatever. I can honestly say the first one I do appreciate more than the second one, but the third one I think I like better than the first two.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more refined, more song oriented. We do have a track on there that's a bit long, a 9-minute track with a bunch of crazy acrobatic instrumental parts as well. And that was the ego kind of creeping in, like, okay, like we've got like 12 songs, but there's nothing really crazy going on. Maybe we should do something to give some, the prog guys a bone. So there is some ego-ness in that particular track where the other one's a little bit more free.
Yeah, but you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. It's interesting. Here I am watching you. We're having this conversation, but I'm looking at you, and I can almost see you're uncomfortable with the idea, almost like you have to explain that you did that and that it's okay to do that, right? Because I think what most prog musicians don't want to get labeled as is the noodler, the guy who plays a million notes because he can, even though it's expected from the fan base. It's a bizarre thing. But man, you just keep being you. And you said something a second ago that I want to hit on. You said, I don't know if it was me or if it's Shumaun. And I'm like, you are Shumaun.
Yeah, and it's funny because I actually had the conversation with a friend of mine. He's actually the guitar player and singer of Iris Divine, where I played him a track from the first record, and I was like, I don't know if this makes sense. It's kind of poppy, and he pretty much just straight up said, well, regardless of what it is, it's still you. So I don't think it's that much of a difference. You should just go ahead and put it on there. And I just kind of took that with me. And I just think at this point, as long as it's coming from me, it's honest and authentic. I shouldn't shy away from putting that Shumaun banner on it.
Yeah.
That's kind of my approach.
Yeah. So I have a few more questions, but I want to ask you, what does Shumaun mean? Because I looked it up and I couldn't find anything.
It's a Sanskrit word.
Okay.
And it's my middle name. Yep. It means peaceful mind. Essentially, kind of translates as peaceful mind. or calm mind. So it kind of goes with the vibe of the message that I, try to, translate over.
Yeah. Well, Farhad means helper too, doesn't it?
Yeah. So my dad named me after a Persian character. It's like the Persian Romeo and Juliet, a tragic love story. So he named me after Farhad, who's the guy who never got his love and ultimately died for it.
It's awful and awesome all at the same time. Was your family a positive environment? Was that a good place to grow up and to be nurtured into the musician you became?
It's immigrant family, so they have a different set of standards for their children. Like most immigrant kids will tell you that music and the arts aren't really the first go-to place that they want their children to dabble in. It's more like, why don't you study more? And when you're young, and I get it, they're looking out for your future. But it was a little bit difficult at times, for sure. When I was younger, he's starting to grow his hair out. What's going on? Like, who are the kids he's hanging out with? But then as you get older, they get used to it. And now they're just like, yeah, our son, he's a musician. So,
well, you are in your early 40s, so they have to give you a little bit of leeway by now, I think.
Yeah, and I've got a real job as well. So I think they've given up on me giving up on music. Like, they know that's not going to happen. There's periods of time where I don't write as much as other times, but I find that if I force myself, sometimes it sounds forced. But then when I don't force myself, sometimes nothing will happen. So, you have to force yourself, or, if you're just waiting for inspiration, I might have, 12 songs in the period of 50 years. So it doesn't work that way for me.
Well, speaking of that, when do you plan on having the new record available to distribute?
I'm hoping by the end of the summer latest. This album was actually supposed to be out last fall. But then obviously the pandemic hit. And for me, it was a kind of a test, because the second album came out in 2019. And I wanted to have a record the following year. We had bands like Rush that, would be like, we had an album in 75 and then an album in 76. And Rush, I think, had 2 albums in 75 for that matter, or 76 or whatever. And I wanted to kind of be like, I wonder if I can just release a record, a year after. So I was kind of disappointed that COVID hit, and obviously that's a minor inconvenience when you think of the greater scheme of things. But so we had to postpone it to 2021, and it's not out yet. So I'm hoping summer sticks and we can release it. But if anything happens, hopefully in 2021.
Yeah. What's left to do, if I may be so bold? I mean, if you've parked it, you've got songwriting. I mean, do you have mastering or some other actual physical production to do? Because I don't think anybody's doing CDs or distribution.
Yeah, we do plan on doing CD distribution. Right now we have about 4 songs mixed and mastered.
Gotcha.
There's 12 songs total. And it's currently being mixed. So our audio engineer is a guy called Brett Caldos Lima. He works off Tower Records in France. Tower Studio. Sorry, not Tower Records. Tower Records is something completely different.
Yeah.
Tower Studio in France. So he's kind of mixing top down. So he's mastering while he's mixing. So once I approve a mix, it's usually mastered already. So we've got about, maybe about 6 more tracks to go. And then we'll be finished with that. And then I'll look into pressing, and then there's PR and all that good stuff. So PR, we'll probably do a 2-month campaign before the album is released.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm hoping summer, if not early fall. Now that I'm thinking about it, now that you have me thinking about it, I'm thinking we're already like approaching May. So yeah, hopefully late summer, early fall.
Well, I'm early to the party then. This is cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Final question. What have you learned from your songwriting failures?
Songwriting failures. Oh, wow. I'm not sure what a songwriting failure is, honestly. Can you talk about that a little bit, and then I can.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Well, I mean, I don't know if I can't tell you what a failure is, but I know from my own experience, as an example, back in the mid 80s, when I was trying to break into the zeitgeist with my band, I started writing material and arranging material how I was hearing it, right? I was trying to fit in the mold versus being true to myself. And that is recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I think that's when I feel for me, if I was trying to do that, that's when I can gauge failure. Like, did I write the perfect song that meets the criteria of what Dream Theater might do or something like that? But I think if you're writing from yourself and you're being honest, you can't really fail, because if that's how you feel, you're kind of discrediting yourself in a sense. And so, I can look back at songs and say, oh, wow, I don't really like that song as much, but it was exactly what I needed to do at that time. And that was a complete pure reflection of where I was at that time. Maybe I wasn't in a place that I am happy about, but that song reflects that. So I don't think I have song failures. I think that the listener can tell me if they absolutely hate a song. That's a fail in that particular case. But maybe there's someone else that absolutely loves the song. So I don't think for me to judge. I think it's for everybody else that's listening to me to say if this sucks or if it's good or.
Well, I love Shumaun. And I will tell you that as long as you continue to allow yourself the opportunity to evolve, and that you continue to write music that works for you, your tribe finds you, man. It stops being about what an influence would think, or how you even feel about, if an influence would like your song. For example, you talk about Dream Theater a lot, and you might, as a guitar player, say, well, man, this is something I would love John Petrucci to say, wow, Farhad, that's fantastic. But if you write for that fleeting moment, right, you're never going to win. So I think the key in the superhero journey, in the artist journey, is realizing this is who you are. You've been downloaded with this set of gifts, and you hold true to that, and you push forward no matter what, and everything falls away. And all the naysayers, they were never in your camp anyway.
Yeah.
So. And then guys like me, we fall in love with it, and we stick around because we recognize the human behind the artifice of the art.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what you can say about any art for that matter, as long as you're staying true to yourself. If there's an audience, great. If there isn't, you're kind of doing it for yourself anyway. So you don't lose either way. There's only something to gain, different levels of that. Obviously, if there's millions of people that like what you do, then there's a financial reward as well, which is fantastic. But otherwise, you're kind of doing it for yourself anyway. So,
well, I thank you so much for your time, Farhad. You've been a fantastic guest. I love your music. Shumaun is destined for something very special. I have a category in my shows called New Classic. You fit squarely in the middle of it because I think it's so close to flipping over for you. And I haven't met a lot of people in my life that deserve it. And I recognize that in you. And you may not necessarily feel like you deserve it, but brother, trust me, you're writing something very special, and I'm glad I'm a part of it. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that really means a lot to me. Anytime you want to talk, you know where to find me.
I'm your brother. Yeah, we're good.
Thank you so much.
So thank you. So we'll keep an eye out on it. Last thing, tell us where we can find all your material.
So if you go to shumaun.com, SHUMAUN.com, you can stream all our songs. You could buy our records. You can sign up on our mailing list for news or anything like that. You can find us on Facebook, same moniker, Shumaun. We're there.
Awesome. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.